You can fund your business up to $150,000 at 0% interest within just a few weeks if you do it smart. It comes down to being prepared, maximizing each application, and working with the right professionals to get it done efficiently. So here I'm going to walk you through the entire process to getting your business funding and doing it fast. So to fully prepare for your business funding applications, you want to optimize your personal credit. So although we're applying for business funding, your personal credit will be an important factor because you're the owner of the business. So the banks will be looking at you and your past history to determine how you might perform with the business debt. So that's why you want to do a couple different action items to fully prepare to get the best results. So for your personal credit, a few things to pay attention to is number one, removing any negative accounts. So these are late payments, collections, charge-offs, bankruptcies. Any of these are going to fully put a stop at your business funding process. So you want to get these off. You can dispute these through the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and they will allow you to dispute any negative item on your credit report that you deem to be unfair, inaccurate, or incorrect. So depending on the different strategies, you might be able to dispute them through a letter process or reaching out to them directly. So there are different strategies out there to get this done, but it might take you a couple months to actually get these items off. So ideally you want to get this process started as soon as possible. The next one to pay attention to is going to be your inquiries. So inquiries are also a limiting factor if you have too many of them. And that's because the banks don't want to lend to people that are desperate for debt. So the banks prefer to lend to people that don't actually need the money as much. And if you have a lot of inquiries on your report, you look a little bit more desperate because you're applying a little bit too fast. So ideally you want to have below 3 inquiries on every single bureau. So on Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, you'll have below 3 on every single bureau, which will allow you to apply for funding. And 3 is the threshold because once you start getting to 4 and above, any application will very likely automatically get denied because you have too many applications or too many inquiries on your report. So it's best to actually get the inquiries removed. So inquiries don't matter once they are over 12 months old. So if you have old inquiries on there, you don't have to worry about those. But if you do have a lot of recent inquiries, you could potentially dispute any inquiry that is not attached to an open personal account. So if you have business applications or personal applications that you were denied for, you could potentially challenge these inquiries, get them off, clean up your report, and then get that much closer to your funding. Then other items would be actually building up a foundation on your personal credit. So having at least 4 open personal credit accounts. Ideally out of that, you would have 2 or 3 personal credit cards. And this allows you to really have more on-time payments every month. And it's a little bit of a thicker file that the banks prefer to see because you are managing multiple different accounts. You seem a little bit more trustworthy compared to someone that only has 1 personal credit card, for example. And here you've been able to show that you've been responsibly managing debt without any late payments, hopefully, and any of that. So by doing all this, you'll have a better credit foundation so that you can then leverage this to be then applied towards your business funding applications. For the business side of things, you can also prepare your business for the funding. So some items you would want to pay attention to are just basics, such as having a business email set up, a business website. Depending on what type of business you're running and how long you've been running your business, you might want to actually build up the business's credit as well. So having on-time payments. Ideally, you also want to set up an entity structure. So having at least an LLC, potentially a corp, but for most people, an LLC is the easiest and most straightforward way to get that done. So having all that set up, you'll be that much closer to your funding there. So don't forget to really prepare your personal credit and your business to then get ready for your funding. So now, once you actually begin your funding process, there's a couple different ways to make it go a little bit faster. Number one is to actually get high limits on every single account that you get approved for. Obviously, getting higher limits will allow you to get closer to your goal that much faster without having to do that many more applications. So if your goal, for example, is to get $50,000 in funding, well, it is possible to get that much funding on just 1 account. So instead of having to apply for a lot of them, make sure you have everything set up so you can just get 1 application done and 1 approval to then reach your goal. So to make sure to get high limit approvals on your different business credit cards, the first way is to make sure that your personal credit is really optimized, you have the highest scores possible, and you want to have comparable debt on the personal side that will then reinforce your application for the banks. The banks, in most cases, they want to see comparable debts. So if you've been able to handle large limits before, they'll feel comfortable providing them to you in the future. So this means you want to have high limits on the personal credit side of things that you can then leverage to get high limits on the business. So ideally, whenever I recommend my clients actually get started with their funding, we want to have at least one credit card with a $10,000 limit on the report. So this could be a personal credit card that you actually possess, or it can also be an authorized user account. So an authorized user account is whenever you get added to someone else's credit card. On the credit bureau's eyes, you actually have access to the credit card, but you don't actually even need to use or have access to that credit card. It just looks like you're managing it and you're responsible for it, but the whole benefit of an authorized user is that you're getting added to the report, and now the account is then going to be reported to it. So now you have that high limit credit card on your report, and this is going to help you towards that high limit credit on your business funding side of things, because most of the time the banks will be comfortable extending you limits that are about 3 to 4 times the highest limit that you have on your personal credit cards. So if your highest limit is $2,000, for example, you will only get access to maybe $8,000 in business credit, right? It might be up to 5 times more, so you potentially could push up to 10. But if your limit is $10,000, well, here you might get $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000. So once you cross that 5-figure threshold with the 10,000 or plus, then you'll actually open up more doors to get higher limits on every single business credit card account. So that'll take you fewer accounts to then reach your goal. So that's one way to get there faster. Another way to accelerate this process is by working with a relationship manager. So this is a high-level banker that works with various banks, and they typically work with either high net worth individuals or successful business owners. In some cases, if you have the right connections, you can also access them as well. This is a resource that I provide to my clients. I have relationship managers throughout many different banks because I've been in this industry for a while, but there are different ways to get access to these. You can either go in person and start talking to people in the actual branch, or by networking and connecting with other individuals that might have gotten funding before. But the overall idea here is that you'll be working with a business banker that has direct connections with the underwriters. These are the decision makers at the bank. So they'll actually talk to the underwriters and represent you and your business to them. So for example, with Chase, we have relationship managers that work with Chase. And so I would submit a profile to my business banker, and then he'll actually communicate that to the underwriters and try to present them in the best profile possible. So they'll help us get higher limits on each and every account, and they can also help with reconsiderations. So let's say that for whatever reason we get denied for an application. It happens very rarely will you get accepted for everything, but they will actually be able to push the application into reconsideration for you, because most of the time whenever you submit an application, it purely just gets through to an algorithm, a robot that looks through your different data points, through your personal credit and your business setup, and it'll determine for the bank whether or not you get approved and for what. But for reconsideration, typically an actual underwriter or a person will review it. So in this case, the relationship manager can make this process a lot smoother and a lot faster, and again, get us better results as well. So I definitely recommend working with a relationship manager. The last tip that I have is going through fast funding rounds. So this kind of ties in with the inquiries that I mentioned earlier. So whenever you're applying for business funding, they will likely put a hard inquiry on your report. And that's because they want to look at your personal credit and dive in a little bit deeper than they could have by simply doing a soft pull. So they'll be looking at your credit report and adding that hard inquiry. However, as I mentioned, once you have more than 3 inquiries on the bureau, you're essentially tapped out and you can't apply anymore. So whenever you're applying for business funding, you're essentially playing Tetris. You'll be applying for different banks that will be pulling different credit bureaus, and you're going to stack them through every different one until you hit that 3 mark. So once you hit the 3 mark, you're essentially tapped out, but it does not mean that your funding sequence is over and you have to wait an entire year. So what you can do from here is that you can actually dispute all the inquiries that are on your report, even for business applications that you get approved for, and that's because the accounts will not be showing on your personal credit report. So So the goal here is to actually go through a funding round, maximize as much as you can, and then once you're done and you hit that 3 threshold, then you take a pause, you clean up all the inquiries, and then you can actually start over again and go through a whole new round of funding applications. So that's why you can actually submit a lot of applications just within a few weeks, because you're able to apply, clean up, and go again. So this is a very widely used strategy that a lot of different people in the credit space use, and you can also take advantage of this. So that's another way how you can actually go through the funding process a lot faster. So that's basically it. That's how you fund your business up to 150K at 0% interest in just a few weeks. So the important part is going through that preparation work, making sure that you're optimized before you actually get started, and then use all the tips in this video to then get everything knocked out, get the best results, get that support, and then go through those different rounds right there. So hopefully this helps you out. Let me know what your funding goals are just below. I'd love to hear more about it. And otherwise, go ahead and subscribe to this channel so you can learn more about funding. Let's help you scale that business.